Wake Up with Patti Katter.
I love the show.
I never miss an episode. It's the best.
I turn it on and turn it up.
You're listening to and watching Wake Up with Patti Katter. Everybody, I am really excited today because I have my personal podcast mentor on the show today. Mike Young is joining us. Mike, welcome to the show.
Patti, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm so excited. You guys, Mike is the Makeover Master, like the Makeover Master.
It sounds kind of lame, doesn't it? Like the Makeover Master. People think I do home decorating or home design or something, I guess.
No, I picture like, I don't know if you're a woman, you especially probably have seen these makeovers like with clothing and things. We're not going to go there. I would never torture Mike to make him take me shopping for clothes. Never. But
I won't put on makeup either.
That I don't think that would be a good idea. Although that might be a good challenge for you. You guys, he makes over websites and podcasts. I'm going to let him tell you a little bit more in detail about that, though, because I don't want to really mess that up. His words are a lot better than mine when explaining his business. But Mike, before we get going too deep, could you tell our listeners just a little bit about where you grew up and how you were as a kid, basically?
Yeah, I grew up in a suburb of Portland, Oregon. I was actually born in Tennessee, but moved to Portland at a very young age, like 2. I always thought I was going to be a professional baseball player, like from a very early age, ever since I can remember, really. I really didn't have a plan B. I would say that school was an unnecessary thing that I had to do just so I could keep playing baseball. So, the first 23 years of my life, all the way through college, I thought I was going to be a professional baseball player, and it didn't work out. I ended up tearing a ligament in my elbow in my freshman year of college. And that was kind of my first identity loss, I would say, is like I kind of had to say, okay, this whole thing that I built my life around isn't going to work out. What the heck am I going to do next? I might as well actually go to school and get a job, or what was that next chapter of my life going to be? But that was pretty much it growing up. It was baseball, and it was a little bit of girls as I got older. But it was very laser focused on one thing until I realized that wasn't going to work out for the rest of my life.
That must have been a pretty big game changer for you, because I know when I was growing up, I thought I'll do this one thing and shit happened.
Yeah. And I don't know how that came about, to be honest. I mean, I think I've always been that way. Like when I was a little kid and eating meals, I would always eat one thing at a time. I would eat the chicken, and then I would eat the potatoes, and then I would eat the corn. And it's like my brain seems to be hardwired that way. It's like I have to, kind of like Ben Affleck in The Accountant, if you've ever seen that movie. It's like I have to finish the puzzle. I have to finish one thing at a time before I can move on to the next. And that first chapter of my life was really, I had to become a pro baseball player, even though it didn't end up happening. I just didn't have a backup plan. I'm not very good at backup plans either. It's like I'm fully committed, all or nothing. That's kind of how I'm wired.
Mm-hmm. So what changed? I mean, as soon as you discovered, geez, I'm not going to be able to do this, I'm not going to be able to play baseball. What do you do next?
I had a friend who was in the mortgage business at the time, and she was like, I think I was looking for a job. And so I was asking friends, kind of like you network and do all those things. And she's like, I think you'd be really great at what I do. And she was making a couple $100,000 a year. And so that, as a kid, coming out of college, that just seemed like, well, that's what I want to do. I want to make lots of money. I think just like everybody else, I believed that the path was go to high school, you go to college, you make a lot of money, you get a big house, you get married, you have 2 kids, and then somehow magically you're going to be happy. And I went into the mortgage business. I ended up starting my own company with 5 partners. And we built it from the ground up, from scratch, to 250 employees, 10 offices in less than 5 years. And I had all those things. I had the house, I had the wife, I had the business, but I was miserable. I was going to the office 70, 80 hours a week, at the time, my son was 1 year old, and I just had enough. I was just going into the office, and it was the last place I wanted to be. I was really not happy in that kind of 9 to 9 cube life environment. I had 300 to 400 emails a day coming at me from the company. I was in charge of helping people market and brand themselves and sell their business. Like how do you become a loan officer and differentiate yourself? And I went home one night and I told my wife, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And my wife's kind of a baller. She just goes, well, then just quit. And in less than 2 weeks, I was out of the mortgage business. And it was a powerful time in my life because I quit and I didn't have a plan. All I knew is I didn't want to be doing that. I didn't want to wake up 18 years later and have my son not really know his dad. I didn't want to be that dad was always at the office. And so that was kind of, my path to start the entrepreneurial journey.
So this past Christmas, I won a gift from Zach Babcock. It was his little course. And that's kind of how I connected with Mike. Mike is really encouraging. He is in Zach's group and he's always throwing information out there. And I noticed one day that Mike offered like a 5-minute critique of your website, basically. And I was like, oh man, I already knew I had some things to fix, but I wanted somebody who would legit tell me without sugarcoating it. Because, you ask your friends, you're like, what do you think of the website? Oh, looks great. Looks like crap, you guys, sometimes. And, I just wanted somebody who's going to be honest and somebody that I would appreciate their input. And I looked at Mike's stuff. I looked at his website. I looked at some of the people that he's worked with. And I'm like, whoa, I'm going to take him up on this offer. So I did and have been amazed by all of the great advice that Mike has given me. And the best thing that I like about him is he will point out things when I do something wrong. So I actually really appreciate that. And one of the things that I'll just toss out there for you guys listening is if you have a mentor and they suggest you do something, I suggest you do what they're telling you to do, because if you don't follow their advice, then you're not going to grow and get anywhere. And that's, originally why you signed up with them, right, Mike?
Well, I would say with one caveat, make sure your mentor's actually done what you're trying to do. There's a lot of people giving very bad advice out there that are trying to coach people and life coach people, and they haven't done it themselves yet. And so just make sure that when you pick a mentor, that it's in alignment with you. They've already done what you're trying to accomplish for yourself. And then really you do need to kind of dig in and stop listening to all the noise, because there's so many places today that we can get our information from. So it becomes disinformation. It's like you're not able to tell the forest through the trees if you consume too much like I did. And that's really, I know your podcast is all about overcoming adversity, but my mortgage business before I quit was failing, and I knew it. I could see the writing on the wall. My bank accounts were dwindling. I was dumping a whole bunch of money back into the company. And when I quit, we went from liquid millionaire to $200,000 in debt in less than 6 months. And so I kind of found myself in my second form of like identity loss. I kind of went from, I had everything I was supposed to have, and now I'm dead broke, more than broke, I'm in debt. And it was a crushing blow for me. And I had to go through an 8.5 year period where I spent a couple $100,000 buying books and courses and seminars and went to every event I could afford, trying to figure out how to become a successful entrepreneur, how to run my business. I had that dream that everybody has, how do you do what you love to do on your time with only clients that you want to take on? And how does money kind of magically appear in the bank account? I actually thought it was going to be easy because I'd already built a company from scratch. I found myself almost a decade in, a couple $100,000 later, and I was even more confused than ever because I'd almost over accumulated knowledge. I had books and courses and all this stuff, and yet my business still wasn't working. And I had to go through a process to make myself over. That's where it began. I realized at the end of the decade, it was because I had significant personal resistance. A lot of, people call them mindset issues, or they might call them personal blocks. but that the trauma of losing $1 million in less than 6 months, it messed me up for a long time psychologically. And I had to kind of make over myself. I had to deal with those issues I was afraid to deal with. And that's kind of where the Makeover Master came from. It was like, you have to make over yourself before any tools or tactics or strategy will ever work for your business. So we do make over websites, we make over brands, but more than anything else, I work with small business owners and entrepreneurs. And a lot of times there's something personally holding them back that they don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just deal with those issues one at a time, and eventually the business starts clicking.
Mm-hmm. One of the great things that I like about you, Mike, is when we had our first meeting after that 5-minute call or 5-minute video that you did for me, you pretty much were like, you have these numbers, you have this and this, what's holding you back? And I didn't understand at the time, but I definitely do now after talking with you. Those listening know I love volunteering for people and helping people. And one of the things that I felt guilty about was promoting myself and promoting my show. And Mike was like, hey, the better you do, the more people you can help. And as soon as I flipped that switch, I was like, oh, I mean, obviously I want to help our family, my family too. And I want to, go on more vacations and I want to do this and that. But Mike was great at helping me pinpoint exactly what was going on. And I think it's because of his experience too, that he can do that.
Yeah, we're crazy creatures, right? And the resistance shows up in these weird, awkward ways, and it's not always what you think. Sometimes it's little feelings of guilt, like you said, about I don't want to be overly promotional, or I don't want to do this, or I don't want to show off all my clients that I've helped. But a lot of times, if you don't have the foundations of business set and you don't even understand what those foundations are, those are actually the things that are attracting people to you and taking the first step and buying from you. You need to understand these foundations, how to build authority and position yourself, and how to persuade people and persuade people ethically, so that you can do what you love to do a whole lot more of it, put a lot of money in the bank. And then from that place, your emotions, your mindset, they kind of all regulate when you're not stressed out. If you can afford Starbucks that day, those, and I think the thing is that I went through all of it. And so I see different resistance in people, and sometimes it's a spouse, and sometimes it's internal feelings, and sometimes it's a trauma that happened sometimes as early as childhood that they just haven't dealt with and let go of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You've made me feel a lot better too. Like, I feel like I have so much more self-confidence even because after talking with you, Mike, I sat down and I started writing some of my accomplishments, and I ended up with pages, and I was like, whoa, I actually am a badass, like Mike said.
Well, it's so funny because we don't, what I find is that everybody is like, I have some really weird abilities, but one of them is I can see people's potential, and I can also see the power of their existing story right off the bat a lot of times. But we don't see it in ourselves. We don't ever take a step back and say, what have I actually done over the last 10 years? What's all the adversity I've faced and the obstacles I've overcome? And when you do that, it's a powerful exercise, because you're like, wow, I remember the time I had to sell the car to pay my team, or I drove 500 miles to catch my wife's cat that had gotten lost. I've done some weird stuff, and you kind of put it together in a story, like if you were going to create a movie about yourself, and then you see it and you're like, oh my gosh. And that's what I saw with you, Patti, is like, as soon as you told me your story, it's like, I got emotional, because you've overcome so many things. And sometimes people don't recognize how strong they actually are and how much they've already done until they take that time to reflect a little bit.
Well, you are amazing. And anybody listening, if you need a business makeover, definitely contact Mike. I just see he had a little peeper in the background.
Yeah, I've got kids at school, and so the online school with the COVID these days. So
I'm gonna have to interview her next.
she's a peach.
So what is one of the most satisfying things that you've experienced just helping people experience this makeover that you give them?
I think, you kind of touched on it in early in the show. I always liked those extreme home makeover shows, and like even the makeup transformation shows. It's like I would describe it as watching the spark come back into people's lives. Like it's in there for almost everybody. It's like this process of reclaiming it, and somewhere early on, you're kind of going through life as a kid, and you just try different stuff, and you're not beating yourself up if you do something wrong, and you're just a kid. But then you go into school and you're told to, stand in line and sit down and shut up and pay attention. And that conditioning over time leads people to a place where they don't accept themselves, and they feel like they're always doing something wrong, because that's kind of how we're brought up, is like, oh, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. And so a lot of times this reclaiming who's in there is like an unlayering process. It's removing stuff that's gotten built over the top of you. And I always enjoy when I can see the spark come back, when I can see that twinkle in the eye, that the person's like, hey, I'm actually a hell of a lot stronger than I think. And I think I've got something here. Your show has a tremendous amount of listeners. And even that, you didn't even really see the power of your audience and stuff from your perspective. You were just like, oh, I got, no big deal. I've got 750,000 active listeners. Oh, that's not a big deal. And it's like, that blows my mind. I'm just like, do you even know the percentage of people that have grown an audience that big? And it's very, very small. And so if I can help people just admit the truth to themselves and see their own awesomeness, then I feel like I've done my job.
You're awesome, Mike. I keep saying that. You really are. Where can people go to? I know you can go to the website for you. What is your website?
It's themakeovermaster.com. I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn and Clubhouse and YouTube and all those places. I try not to hang out on social as much anymore. Just because I feel like it's a trap for a lot of people, and a very addictive trap. And that's part of why I love doing what I do, is helping people kind of reclaim themselves, reclaim their business, so that they can do what they actually want to do, which is a lot of times just being present with their family and friends and having cool experiences and doing cool things.
And are you still giving away that 5-minute free consult? It's not really a consult. What do you call it?
It's still on my site as we record this podcast, but it's soon to be gone.
Okay.
And so, and it's the only reason it's going to be gone is I'm running into some, personal time, and it's really, we're getting a lot of requests for that. And I want to stay focused on my clients and make sure that I'm giving them my very best. And so, there's a ton of free resources on the site. There's about to be a new course that's going to be on the site that people can get access to the foundations and understand this stuff. But if anybody wants to connect, they can definitely find me on social or find me at themakeovermaster.com.
Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you so much for being on the show. Is there anything that you'd like to add?
I would add, let's say, I always like to tell people, you got one life, and life is short, I think it's decide what you want, accept yourself, and love yourself enough to fully go after it. It's, if 2020 and this year's taught us anything, I hope it's that life is too short to do something that you don't love to do. The hard thing is the decision, that's the thing that everybody struggles with. But figuring out all these little moving pieces of the game, it's like you'll figure it out if you just stay consistent at it. So decide what you want and go get it, and don't let anybody tell you that you're not worth it.
Great advice. And everybody, again, go to Mike's website. We're going to have his website information in the show notes and on the screen if you're watching. And Mike, thank you again. And everybody, I just cannot talk so as highly, I don't even know. My tongue is getting twisted. I don't do this. I don't get too emotional very often, but Mike has been extremely helpful to me. And I just cannot thank him enough And it's funny because I've had all sorts of people on my show and I've never gotten nervous, but this show I've been a little bit nervous because I know when we're done,
I don't know why.
I feel like I'm going to ask you, like, what should I have done differently? Because you're my mentor. And I really respect that. I mean, you've taken a lot of time to help me. And I mean, I've met celebrities, I've met all sorts of people and never once have gotten nervous. And this time I was a tiny bit nervous.
Well, I mean, I think the one thing that I'd also close with is everything always seems to work out in your favor. You know, it's like all timing is perfect. And even the mistakes or the times where things don't go your way, there's always a learning lesson. There's always some kind of golden nugget that comes from those things. So there's just no reason to be nervous. It's like, if you can like get really, really clear on what you're going after and why that means something to you, then you can do a lot of good in this world and watch the ripple kind of effect, you know, start to impact other people's lives in a positive way.
That's really true. You always have something good. Well, thank you again, Mike, for being on the show. And everybody, thank you so much for listening. And be sure to tune in every Friday morning and tell all your friends and family members about the show. Thank you again for tuning in and listen to Wake Up with Patti Katter on your favorite podcast, Amazon, TV, Roku, and a whole bunch of other places. Find me on social media. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Patti.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Wake Up with Patti Katter.
Thank you.
Thank you for all you do.
Follow Patti at Patti Katter on Facebook and Instagram.
Get social.
You can now watch Wake Up with Patti Katter on Amazon TV and Roku.
It's the only podcast I listen to.
Be sure to check out Patti's apparel line, The Patriotic Mermaid, at thepatrioticmermaid.com and on social media at The Patriotic Mermaid.
I love it.
Special thanks to Patti's content creator, Alicia Thompson.
Thanks for all that you do.
Visit thompsoncreate.com for all your marketing and design inquiries.